Somewhere right now, someone is stuck. Dead phone, empty tank, no signal, no streetlights, and something out there already knows it. The 4 stories you're about to hear all happened to real people who thought the worst part of being stranded was the waiting. They were wrong. The worst part was realizing they weren't alone out there, and whatever found them wasn't lost at all. Stay to the end, because the last story still doesn't have an explanation, and once you hear it, you'll understand why the person who lived through it still won't go back. Story 1. The Man Who Followed the Headlights. I want to start by saying I've never believed in anything supernatural. I'm the guy who rolls his eyes at ghost stories at parties. I'm telling you that up front because it matters for what happened to me on Route 9 2 winters ago. I drive for a rideshare app on weekends to make extra cash on top of my regular job. Nothing glamorous, just late-night runs to bars and airports. On this particular night, I picked up a fare heading almost 40 minutes outside the city, way further than I usually go, but the payout was good and I needed the money that week. I dropped the passenger off at a farmhouse at the end of a gravel driveway with no other houses in sight and started heading back toward the highway. About 10 minutes into the drive back, my dashboard lit up with a warning light I'd never seen before. Within a minute, the engine started sputtering and then it just died. No warning, no smoke, nothing. The car rolled to a stop on the shoulder of a 2-lane road with cornfields stretching out on both sides as far as I could see. I tried restarting it. Nothing. Not even a click. My phone had 12% battery and exactly 1 bar of signal that kept flickering in and out. I called roadside assistance and got put on hold for what felt like forever before the call just dropped entirely. I tried again. Same thing. I decided to save what battery I had left and just wait. It was maybe 1:30 in the morning, the kind of dark where you can't tell if your eyes are open or closed. I turned my hazards on and sat there, trying to convince myself this was just an inconvenient night and nothing more. About 20 minutes in, I noticed my hazard lights were reflecting off something down the road behind me. I checked my mirror and there was a man standing in the middle of the lane, maybe 200 feet back, barefoot, wearing what looked like pajama pants and a plain white t-shirt, even though it had to be close to freezing outside. I told myself he probably lived nearby and was just out for some reason. People do strange things, but he wasn't moving. He was just standing there, facing my car. I locked my doors, which felt ridiculous considering my car wasn't even running, but it made me feel marginally better. I kept checking my mirror every few seconds, half expecting him to be gone. He never was. He also never got any closer for the first 10 minutes or so, which almost made it worse. It felt deliberate, like he was waiting for something. Then, without seeming to actually walk, he was closer. I don't mean he sprinted. I mean 1 second he was 200 feet back, and the next time I looked he'd covered maybe half that distance, and I never actually caught him mid-stride. It was like watching a video with frames missing. I started praying my phone would get enough signal to call someone, anyone. I tried 911 this time. The call connected for about 4 seconds, enough for me to blurt out where I was, before it cut out completely. I don't know if anything actually went through. By the time I looked up again, he was maybe 30 feet from my back bumper, close enough that the glow from my hazards lit up his face every couple of seconds. He wasn't old, maybe mid-30s, and he had this expression that wasn't angry or aggressive. It was closer to confusion, like he was trying to remember something and couldn't quite get there. His mouth was moving slightly, like he was talking to himself, but I never heard a sound through the glass. I sat frozen behind the wheel, watching him get closer in these strange lurching jumps in my perception, until he was standing directly beside my driver's side window. He didn't touch the car. He didn't say anything. He just stood there staring in at me, his breath fogging faintly in the cold, close enough that I could see the whites of his eyes catching the hazard light with every flash. I don't know how long we stayed like that. It felt like an hour. It was probably closer to 2 minutes. Then, headlights came around the bend behind us, far off but growing brighter. The man's head turned toward the approaching lights, slow and unnatural, like his neck didn't quite work the way a neck should, and then he just stepped backward into the cornfield and was gone. Not ran, not walked away, stepped back and disappeared between the stalks like the corn had swallowed him. The approaching car turned out to be a tow truck the dispatch had somehow managed to send before my call dropped. The driver, an older guy named Walt, helped me get the car started with a jump, though he couldn't explain what had caused it to die in the first place, since everything checked out fine once it turned over. When I told him about the man, Walt didn't seem surprised. He said people have reported someone matching that description, walking the shoulder of that stretch of Route 9 for years, always at night, always barefoot, and that a man had gone missing from a psychiatric facility about 15 miles from there back in the 90s and was never found. He said he wasn't saying that's who it was. He just said it wasn't the first time he'd heard a story like mine. I don't drive that route anymore, not even during the day if I can help it. And I never leave my phone below 50% when I'm working a night shift, not since that night. Story 2. The Crying in Miller's Hollow. My sister Beth and I have been backpacking together since we were teenagers. Our parents got us into it, and once they stopped joining trips, we just kept going without them. We know how to read a map, we know how to turn back when weather turns, and we've never once needed to be rescued. I'm telling you that so you understand we weren't careless people. What happened to us wasn't because we did anything wrong. 2 Octobers ago, we planned a 3-day loop through a ridge trail that neither of us had done before, mostly because it was remote and quiet, which is exactly what we wanted. We started early, made good time, and set up camp the first night without any issues. It was on the second day, a few hours after breaking camp, that Beth stopped walking and grabbed my arm. She asked if I'd heard that. I hadn't. We stood still for almost a full minute before I heard it too, faint, carried on the wind from somewhere off the trail to our left. It sounded like a child crying. Not fussing, not whining. The kind of crying that comes from somewhere deep, exhausted, like it had been going on a long time before we ever got close enough to hear it. We looked at each other and didn't even need to discuss it. We left the trail and started heading in the direction of the sound, calling out as we went, telling whoever it was that we were coming, that they were safe. The crying never responded to our voices. It just continued, sometimes fading like the wind had shifted, then growing clearer again as we got closer. Beth kept trying to get a signal on her phone the entire time we were moving, holding it up over her head every so often, but we were deep enough in the hollow that nothing was coming through. I remember thinking that if this really was a lost child, whoever they'd wandered from was probably going through the worst hours of their life right then. We pushed through about 40 minutes of dense brush before the crying suddenly changed. It got sharper, higher, almost panicked, like whoever it was had noticed us getting close and it had frightened them worse. Then, just as abruptly as it had shifted, it stopped completely. We called out for another 20 minutes. Nothing answered. I told Beth to stay put and keep trying for a signal while I did one more sweep of the immediate area. About 15 feet down a small slope, half buried under wet leaves, I found a single child's rain boot. Yellow, small, maybe a toddler's size. No sign of a second boot. No footprints leading to or from it that we could make out in the leaf litter. No clothing, no other belongings, nothing. I called for Beth, and we both just stood there staring at this boot like it was going to tell us something. We searched another hour in widening circles, shouting until our voices gave out, but we found nothing else. No trail, no camp, no sign that a family had ever passed through that hollow. Eventually, Beth got one bar of signal near a rocky outcrop and managed to reach the county ranger station. Search and rescue came out that afternoon and searched through the following day. They found nothing. No missing child had been reported in the county or any neighboring county in the weeks before or after. They kept the boot for records but told us, off the record, that this wasn't the first strange report to come out of that particular hollow. We packed up and drove home early. We didn't finish the loop. I still think about that boot more than I want to admit. Beth says she still hears that crying sometimes when she's trying to fall asleep, and I know exactly what she means because I hear it too. We never found out whose it was or why it stopped right when we got close, and I don't know that we ever will. Some people online we've talked to since have theories, most of them worse than not knowing at all, and honestly, I think I prefer the not knowing. Story 3, the choir room. My friend Priya and I have known each other since middle school, and by senior year of high school we had a habit of doing dumb, slightly dangerous things together because we both liked the adrenaline. Neither of us drank or partied much, so this was our version of rebellion, I guess. Exploring abandoned buildings. There was an old shuttered Catholic girls' academy on the edge of our town that had been closed since the 80s after some kind of funding scandal. Or that's what everyone said anyway. Nobody actually knew the real story. It sat behind a rusted chain link fence with a padlock that had clearly been cut and re-looped so many times it barely held together. We went on a Friday night in early spring, both of us 17 and thinking we were completely untouchable. We parked 2 streets over so nobody would notice a car near the property, squeezed through the gap in the fence, and made our way to a side entrance we'd heard about from a kid at school who claimed he'd been inside before. The door was unlocked, just like he said. We stepped into what used to be the main hallway, and it was exactly the kind of eerie you'd expect. Peeling paint, water-stained ceiling tiles, old bulletin boards still pinned with decades-old announcements curling at the edges. It smelled like mildew and something underneath that, something faintly sweet and wrong that neither of us wanted to think too hard about. We explored for almost half an hour without anything happening. Classrooms with overturned desks, a library with swollen, rotted books still on the shelves, a chapel with most of its stained glass somehow still intact, throwing colored shapes across the floor from the streetlight outside. It was in the old choir room at the far end of the second floor, where things changed. Priya was ahead of me, filming with her phone for her friends back home, when she suddenly stopped in the doorway and grabbed my sleeve without saying a word. Sitting at the old upright piano in the corner, in near total darkness, was someone. I couldn't make out details, just a shape, hunched slightly forward like they were about to play. We both stood frozen in the doorway for what felt like an unbearable stretch of silence. Then the person at the piano turned their head toward us, slowly, deliberately. We ran. We didn't discuss it, didn't look at each other, just turned and bolted back the way we came, down the main hallway toward the door we'd entered through. Behind us, I heard the unmistakable jarring sound of piano keys being struck all at once, a violent, discordant crash of notes that didn't sound like someone playing so much as someone slamming both forearms down onto the keys. We reached the door. It wouldn't open. Priya was yanking on the handle and I threw my shoulder into it, and it didn't budge even though we'd walked through it minutes earlier without any resistance at all. The piano sound had stopped. Now there were footsteps, unhurried, coming down the main hallway toward us, echoing off the tile in a way that made it impossible to tell how far away they actually were. We ran the opposite direction, deeper into the building toward a fire exit we remembered passing near the gymnasium. The footsteps behind us picked up pace to match ours exactly, close enough that I swore I could feel the air shift, but every time either of us glanced back, the hallway behind us was empty. We made it to the gymnasium, found the fire exit, and this one opened. We didn't stop running until we were back at the fence, and we didn't stop again until we were both inside the car with the doors locked and the engine running. Neither of us has ever gone back. We don't really talk about that night much anymore, but a few years ago, Priya sent me a local news article about the academy finally being scheduled for demolition, mentioning briefly that during a structural survey, contractors had found something walled up behind the old choir room that the article didn't specify, only that police had been called in to investigate. Neither of us has been able to find any follow-up story since. I don't know what we saw at that piano, and I've stopped trying to come up with an explanation that lets me sleep better. Some nights I still hear that crash of piano keys in my head right before I fall asleep, and I have to turn a light on before I can shake it. Story 4. The Man in the Ravine. I've never liked camping. My friend group knows this about me, and they still somehow convince me to go every couple of years anyway, usually under the guise of a reunion trip that's really just an excuse for them to drag me somewhere with no cell service. This past fall, they got me again. We were 4 days into a canyon backpacking trip in a fairly remote stretch of wilderness, the kind of place where you sign in at a trailhead register because there's a real chance no one else will pass through for days. My friend Marcus, who fancies himself an expert on everything, convinced the group that there was a slot canyon nearby worth detouring for, one that wasn't marked on any official trail map, but that he swore he'd read about online. Against my better judgment, we went. The terrain got rough fast, loose scree and narrow ledges above a drop that had to be at least 60 feet down into a dry ravine. We were single file, moving slowly, when the ledge under my foot just gave way. I didn't even have time to shout before I was sliding, then falling, bouncing off the slope until I landed hard at the bottom. I could hear my friends screaming my name from above, but the ravine walls made it impossible to tell exactly where they were, and every direction I looked just showed more rock and more shadow. I was bruised badly and my ankle wasn't right, but nothing felt broken. I started trying to find a way back up, and every path I tried either dead-ended at a sheer wall or crumbled the second I put weight on it. I heard Marcus shouting something down at me, and I could just barely make out him pointing further down the ravine, like there was another way up somewhere along its length. I trusted him. That was my first mistake. I limped along the ravine floor in the direction he'd pointed for what felt like an hour, and when I finally looked back, I couldn't see or hear my friends at all anymore. The ravine had curved and curved again, and I had no idea anymore which direction led back toward them. I kept moving, hoping I'd find a break in the walls, and eventually I did find a section where the rock had crumbled into something almost like a staircase. I started climbing, and about halfway up a slab shifted under my hand and I got wedged, my leg jammed between two boulders that had come loose and pinned together around my ankle. I couldn't move it at all. I screamed for what felt like hours. My voice gave out. The sun started dropping low behind the canyon rim, and I remember thinking clearly, calmly, that I was probably going to die stuck in that gap. That's when I heard someone coming down the slope toward me, careful, unhurried footsteps on the loose rock. I called out, relieved beyond words, and a man came into view, older, weathered, wearing a canvas jacket that looked decades out of style, carrying nothing, no pack, no water, no flashlight, even though it was getting dark. He didn't say anything at first. He just looked at my leg wedged in the rock, then looked at my face for a long moment before crouching down beside me. Up close, Something about him felt wrong in a way I couldn't articulate. Maybe how still he was, or how his eyes didn't quite track normally when he looked at me. He worked the rock loose with more strength than his frame suggested he should have had, and freed my leg without a word. I thanked him, tried to ask where he'd come from, if he had a radio, anything. He just stood and started walking and said, without turning around, that my friends were waiting at his cabin. I didn't question it. I was in too much pain and too relieved to think clearly, so I followed him, limping badly, deeper into the canyon as the light kept fading. After maybe 20 minutes, I realized we were moving further from the direction I'd come from, not closer to anywhere my friends could plausibly be. We eventually reached a small stone structure built into the canyon wall itself, more like a root cellar than a cabin, with a heavy wooden door and no windows I could see. He stopped in front of it and told me to go inside, that it wasn't safe out here after dark and my friends were already waiting. Every instinct I had went off at once. My friends would never go inside a structure like that, especially not without me, and especially not with a stranger who hadn't given his name once during the entire walk. I told him I'd wait outside instead, that I just needed to catch my breath. He turned to look at me, and for the first time his expression changed, something closer to irritation, and he said, quieter this time, that I needed to go inside now. I didn't wait to hear anything else. I turned and ran, ankle screaming with every step, back the way we'd come as best I could remember. I heard him behind me almost immediately, moving faster than I would have believed possible for how he'd looked walking earlier, and for a moment I was certain he was going to catch me. I don't know how, but I lost him in the dark, ducking behind a rock formation and going completely still, biting down on my own sleeve to keep from making a sound. I stayed like that for what felt like the entire night, too terrified to move even after the sounds of him searching for me eventually faded. When the sun came up, I started moving again, and by pure luck stumbled onto the same trail we'd originally been hiking, miles from where I'd fallen. A group of backpackers found me a few hours later and called it in. My friends had already alerted a ranger station the night before and were out searching with a small team when I was found. I told the rangers everything, the stone structure, the man, all of it. They took a report and said they'd look into any structures matching that description in the canyon system. I never heard back about whether they found anything, and honestly, some part of me doesn't want to know. I haven't been camping since, and I don't plan to start again. 4 different people, 4 different nights, and every single one of them ends the same way. No explanation, no closure, and no proof beyond what they carried out of the woods in their own memory. That's the part that should actually keep you up tonight. It's not that something was out there, it's that whatever it was clearly knew exactly how to wait. If one of these stayed with you, tell me which one in the comments, and if you've got your own story like this, I want to hear it, because some of the best ones I've ever covered started exactly that way. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next round of these, because trust me, there are more coming, and some of them are worse.